Another day, another banger. Today, we'll be going over all 6 Death Race movies. We'll begin with the modern timeline first, then move back to the original timeline. So everything is covered in chronological order. When I tell you this series is packed with action, get strapped because once it kicks off, it does not stop. From prison fights and explosions to heavily armed cars tearing through the streets, these movies go all in from start to finish. Without further ado, make sure to sit back, relax, and as always, enjoy the recap. Death Race 2 begins the modern Death Race timeline, which is separate from the original Death Race 2000 continuity. The story begins with an explanation that in 2012 the US economy collapsed so badly that the prison system reached a breaking point, and private companies took over correction facilities, which they now run for profit. A maximum security prison, Terminal Island, is operated by Wayland Corporation, which premieres deadly cage fights of prisoners as a pay-per-view show. In Terminal Island, a fight breaks out between the inmates during exercise time, and several prisoners are killed. A woman named September Jones reports the brawl, and she prompts the warden to act. The warden orders all security officers except the tower guards to stop the fight. The situation escalates as some inmates climb up the tower, resulting in the guards shooting them, but Jones only cares if her cameraman recorded it. Noticing that the prisoners are not backing down, the warden orders a chopper to open fire on the inmates so those who want to live can surrender. On the other hand, a man named Carl Luke heads to a crime boss named Marcus Kane, who tells Luke that he is making Luke in charge of his nephew Vinny and his gang for the upcoming bank robbery. He gives Luke a new car and tells him to ensure that he doesn't mess up the mission. Meanwhile, Wayland calls Jones and the warden to his office, explaining that he is facing a nightmare because of the riot. But Jones urges him to cash it, telling him that the hatred of inmates can be used as entertainment. Elsewhere, Vinny and his men head out to carry out the robbery, while Luke waits in the car. But he notices a police car arriving, so he quickly warns Vinny. He orders them to abort the mission, but they refuse, so Luke follows the officers inside the bank and attacks them. He picks up an officer's gun and angrily demands that Vinny leave, but one of the guards shoots at Vinny's men, making Luke kill a police officer, which results in a shootout. They rush out and get in a high-speed chase with the police while Luke drives through the local market to slow them down. Vinny throws a few grenades, blasting the police cars against Luke's wishes.
Avete capito? Mi faccio prendere!
So he stops at a roadside, ordering Vinny and his teammate to get out, saying he is only sparing them because of Marcus. Luke gets chased and even a chopper is dispatched to arrest him while Marcus watches the news before angrily breaking the TV. Eventually, Luke drives to a broken bridge and he is arrested. 6 months later, he is transferred to Terminal Island, where he remembers the police urging him to testify against Marcus, as it would reduce his sentence, but Luke refused. On the other hand, Marcus is informed that Luke has been sent to prison, and feels relieved that Luke hasn't testified against him. But he believes that after a month Luke would do anything to reduce his life imprisonment. He feels sad that he has to stand against Luke as he loves him like a brother, but tells his men to wait for further orders. Meanwhile, Luke is taken underground where a prisoner named Lists explains that this is a death match, a prison fight show that currently holds a 50% audience share. It peaked at 62% 2 months earlier, but has been declining ever since. He reveals that Big Bill has a death count of 19 and the second is 14K, who has 14 kills. List then explains that Jones is a former Miss Universe, and is now the host and producer of the show. The match begins, and Jones explains that combatants are picked each week randomly, and there are 2 ways to win. Either you kill the opponent or make them submit. Multiple weapons are hidden in the arena, and if no one wins, both fighters are killed. The fight between 14K and Xander begins, with Xander quickly acquiring a weapon. So 14K quickly rushes to a point where he can find weapons, but Jones denies access to increase the viewership while Xander attacks 14K's back with a blade. 14K finds a shield and a flail before hitting Xander's head with his shield and kicking him multiple times before asking Xander to quit, but Xander refuses to submit. Just when 14K is about to kill him, he stops and announces to the camera that Xander has submitted, making Jones furious as the viewership drops instantly. She rushes to 14K and threatens to kill him if he keeps this up, as she knows Xander passed out and 14K faked the submission. Later, Wayland scolds Jones for the drop in rating and orders her to find a way to increase it, or he will hire someone else. The next morning, Luke is having breakfast when he is joined by Goldberg and Rocco, who explain that he is assigned to their work duty. However, before they can discuss more, Luke is called by the warden, who again offers Luke the chance to testify against Marcus and walk away, warning him that Marcus will send assassins after him. After that, Luke is taken to his work shift, where Goldberg explains that they melt the cars and make weapons as the Wayland Corporation uses prisoners as free laborers. Luke wonders if the cars still work, and Goldberg hands him the keys, telling him to take the car on a test drive, which Luke does while Jones observes. Later, all inmates are taken to a room, and Big Bill attacks Luke, wanting to stab him with the sharpened back end of a toothbrush, but Luke fights back, eventually knocking Bill unconscious by hitting him with a guard stick. Jones notices this and heads to the warden's office, where she tells him that she wants to include Luke in her program. But the warden is against it, as he believes that broadcasting Luke would increase the number of assassins sent by Marcus to the prison. However, Jones doesn't care, and she reminds him that the sole purpose of this prison is to facilitate a deathmatch. The next day, Jones approaches Luke and tries to convince him to join a deathmatch by offering him special treatment, but he refuses. For the next episode of Deathmatch, Jones selects List to fight Big Bill, which makes List panic, so Luke volunteers to take his place, but Jones refuses to listen to him. The match begins, and List dodges Bill's attacks, but Bill soon catches him and hits him across the face, drawing blood. Luke jumps inside the cage and attacks Bill, but Bill pushes him back, so Luke asks a ring girl named Katrina if she can help him. Katrina hits Bill using her signboard, and the two inmates get into a fight. Bill opens a weapon point and grabs a flamethrower, so Luke urges List to get out of the cage while he runs. Suddenly, Jones opens the weapons gate and Luke rushes to get a weapon. The inmates start screaming that Luke is cheating, which results in a racial riot among all inmates. Luke grabs a flamethrower as well, but the audience divides into teams based on color and starts attacking each other. Luke rushes on top of the bus and Bill follows him, but Luke pulls Bill down with him. The men jumping into the cage begin attacking and getting aggressive, but Katrina fights back and helps other female inmates. The warden quickly orders Jones to end the transmission, but she refuses as the viewership crosses 70%. He forces her to comply and then sends in the guards to handle the situation. Later, the warden orders Jones to shut down the broadcast, but she argues that only a few murderers died, so it is only a minor setback. Meanwhile, Marcus sees Luke on TV and rushes out to his men, shooting one of them as a warning for the rest, and Marcus orders Luke's assassination. Elsewhere, Wayland urges Jones to accept that Deathmatch has been cancelled, but she threatens to sue him for harassment if he does not let her reinvent the program, so he eventually agrees. Marcus in the meantime calls a meeting and places a $1 million bounty on Luke's head. He gives his men 2 days to complete the mission, warning that if they fail, he will kill them all. The next morning, Jones proposes a new event called Death Race, explaining that they will modify the vehicles available to them by adding bulletproof glass and roll cages to give drivers a fighting chance. She adds that every car will hold as many guns and weapons as possible, and Wayland is impressed with the idea. He suggests that they need a greater prize to keep the audience hooked and decides that inmates can earn their freedom by winning 5 races. Later, Rocco informs his friends of this, but Luke doesn't believe him. However, List wishes he could get out and start a new life, which makes them all hope the same. Soon, Death Race begins with Jones revealing that it will be a 3-day event with 18 criminals testing their luck. She explains that the first challenge is that there are only 9 cars, which results in the prisoners fighting each other and rushing towards the cars. As soon as they get inside a car, they find out that female inmates serve as navigators, and Katrina pushes everyone out of her car until Luke arrives. They quickly get moving, and Katrina gives him an earpiece saying he can talk to his pit team through it, which includes List, Goldberg, and Rocco. Goldberg informs Luke that he will be able to use a shield from the second lap, but for now he should avoid Bill, as he has a huge car, and just then Bill rams into Luke. However, Luke manages to speed away from Bill and finish the lap. Goldberg quickly orders him to find sword and shield pressure points, which Luke finds, but just before he can equip them, a man named Hillbilly rushes his car and grabs the weapon, quickly opening fire on Luke. Goldberg tells Luke to get out, so Luke speeds up and then hits the side of Hillbilly's car until it falls down a wall and bursts into flames. Another player activates shields, but the opponents open heavy fire on him using machine guns, which causes his car to flip and explode. Suddenly, Bill starts targeting Luke, saying that the $1 million are going to be his, which confuses Jones, so she orders the head guard to look into the matter. Meanwhile, another inmate named Apache gets out of his car, orders his female navigator to drive, and jumps onto Shake's car, stabbing him dead. Apache gets back inside his car while Shake's car crashes into a pillar. Luke leads the race, and Goldberg reveals that only the last lap is left, but Bill follows him and opens fire on Luke's car. Luke moves to the smaller road and crosses Bill, eventually finding a sword pressure point, which allows him to use his machine gun. Not knowing the controls, Luke accidentally drops the backplate of his car. So Katrina gets out of the window and points their machine gun back at Bill, making him lose sight of the path and turn away from the racetrack. Luke wins the race and Bill manages to come second, but Bill is furious, so he picks a fight with Luke, but the guards stop him. Later at night, the guards take Luke to Waylon, who congratulates Luke for winning the first race and offers Katrina as a prize before leaving. Katrina mentions that they are likely being monitored by the prison, but the two ignore the warning. On the other side, the head guard tortures an inmate until he reveals that Marcus has put a $1 million bounty on Luke's head. So Jones orders Luke to be put in solitary confinement, as she believes that even the guards might not be able to resist this offer, while Goldberg hears this conversation. After that, Katrina is taken to Marcus, who offers her freedom in exchange for killing Luke. He gives her 48 hours, saying that if she doesn't finish the task he will kill her, and asks her to decide if she considers Luke's life more important than hers. The next morning, the warden is dismissed after repeatedly clashing with Jones and Waylon over the direction the prison is heading, while Jones is proud of the show securing a 65% viewership. Just before the race, Goldberg reveals that the word has spread and all racers will try to eliminate Luke for the sake of prize money. But Luke doesn't believe it. The second race begins, and during the first lap, Bill rams his car into Luke while Jones opens sword pressure points. Apache acquires the sword and opens fire on Luke's car, but Luke finds a shield pressure point and then uses smoke to blur Apache's vision. He then finds a secret weapon point, which brings up a hurdle, causing Apache to drive directly into it. Apache gets out of his car to get back in the race, but Bill intentionally targets him and eliminates him. After that, Callan opens fire on Luke, so Luke turns his car to face Callan's car and turns just before they are about to bump into each other, making Callan crash into a wall and get killed after his car explodes. On the other hand, Xander and 14K target each other, eventually causing 14K's car to crash badly. 14K manages to get out of the car, and Xander opens fire at him, but Luke pushes Xander's car into the wall, saving 14K. Katrina angrily wonders why Luke wasted time protecting 14K, and Luke explains that 14K is from a crime group called Triads, which are Marcus's enemies. He explains that saving a triad means they will save your life in return. Katrina tells Luke about Marcus's offer and claims that since she isn't harming him, he owes her a favor too. Meanwhile, 14K lights up a matchbox and throws it at Xander's car, killing him. Elsewhere, Bill opens fire on Luke, so he tells Katrina to activate their nitro, but it doesn't work because their car has been sabotaged. The car starts malfunctioning, leaving him without guns, smoke, or shields, so he ejects Katrina before the vehicle is struck by Big Bill's heat-seeking missile. The explosion kills Bill's pit crew, and Bill attacks his navigator named Holly, but she stabs him through the eye and kills him. With Luke's car catching fire, Katrina rushes to help him but is unable to rescue him in time. Katrina screams that the car was rigged from the inside, and the pit crew quickly realizes Rocco was after the bounty. The medics take a badly burnt Luke away, and the doctors announce that he will survive. Jones then orders them to pronounce Luke dead so no more assassins come after him. She advertises that a persona known as Frankenstein will be joining the third day of the race. She orders the doctors to wake Luke up from the induced coma, and he is enraged to see his condition, as 85% of his body has suffered from second-degree burns. Jones eventually convinces him by threatening to harm Katrina and explains that he will no longer own his life unless he wears a mask to pose as Frankenstein. Later, he arrives at the track and pushes Goldberg aside to get in the car with Katrina. However, even after the race starts, Luke doesn't move, prompting Katrina to ask why he hasn't joined. On the other hand, a triad assassin kills Marcus at his mansion as 14K's repayment to Luke. Meanwhile, List goes after Rocco while he takes a shower and murders him for betraying his friend. Back in the race, Luke turns his car towards Jones and eliminates her by pinning her against the wall with his car. Katrina becomes impressed with this mysterious identity and asks for his name, but he avoids the question and returns to the race. Death Race 3 Inferno continues the story where Frankenstein has won 4 races and is advertised heavily by the Wayland Corporation for the final race, which if he wins, he will earn his freedom. A documentary shows how Wayland takes pride in Death Race, as it has become one of the most watched TV shows in the entire world. The reporter asks about the rumors that Death Race has been targeted for a hostile takeover, but Wayland dismisses it, saying that it is common for rich people to come after valuable things. However, the British billionaire Niles York claims that he has never lost a battle and will ensure to take over Death Race. Eventually, it is revealed that Wayland has been forced to sell rights to Niles, who claims that Wayland wasn't dealing properly with his business. Niles explains that he will make Death Race global with different racers every 2 weeks, and that he intends to relocate the program to South Africa. Wayland reminds him that 90% of the audience tunes in for Frankenstein, and if he wins the final race he will be set free, making the show lose its value. However, Niles only mocks him by saying that he will send Wayland a pack of cigars when he makes the show a global success. Once Wayland leaves, Niles orders his secretary named Prudence to look into Frankenstein, as the company is currently earning £8 million weekly by only selling Frankenstein's merchandise. Meanwhile, Wayland visits Luke, claiming that he got Luke's disfigured face fixed because he cared. But Luke tells Wayland that he deserved to lose the company. He claims Wayland fixed him for selfish reasons, as his show would have flopped without him because he is the Frankenstein. After that, Luke is taken hostage by Niles, who removes his mask and explains that he is sending Luke to the Kalahari Desert Penitentiary to participate in the Desert Death Race, and to help Niles launch multiple such races. However, Luke claims that he will win the last race and earn his freedom, but Niles threatens to kill him if he wins. Later, Frankenstein and his associates reach the facility in South Africa, where the prisoners of the Kalahari facility are on their mining duty. But the prisoners start mocking Goldberg for the sake of territory, which results in a fight. Multiple men attack Katrina, which makes Luke jump in, but the Terminal Island prisoners are outnumbered. Several men attack Luke, so he retaliates, knocking multiple of them unconscious. But one of them manages to remove Luke's mask, exposing his identity. Luke continues to fight his way through inmates, but Liszt picks up Frankenstein's mask and soon he is joined by Luke's team, who are shocked to see him. Katrina slaps him and Goldberg states that they believed he was dead while he was simply fooling them. Goldberg says they fixed Luke's face and are now going to give him his freedom while the rest of them are left to rot in prison. Luke tells them to think whatever they want and grabs his mask before leaving. After that, they are all taken down to the cells where electricity is generated by running prisoners, and Luke is kept in solitary confinement. The next morning, Luke goes to see his car and is pleasantly surprised to find that he has been assigned a bigger and better car. Goldberg explains that he has suffered a lot during his life, but he has never lied or betrayed a friend, telling Luke that he should have trusted them. Before the first race, the pool of female convicts acting as navigators are pitted against each other to participate in the Navigator Wars, in which 16 women will be fighting for the 10 spots available. Liszt explains that Katrina has a celebrity status, which means that she will be the most targeted, reducing her survival chance to only 10%. Just as the bell rings, 4 women surround Katrina, but she fights them fiercely. The viewership is relatively low, so the host named Satana activates the weapon pressure points, prompting a woman to grab an axe and behead her opponent, while Katrina defeats another woman in combat to grab a flamethrower. A girl tries to throw a spear at Katrina, but Katrina sets her on fire before she can do so, making the viewership reach over 90%. One of the 2 serial killer sisters is killed by a sharp object piercing her, making the other sister scream in pain. Another woman throws a weapon at Katrina, but she dodges it, making it kill the woman behind her, and the game ends as only 10 women remain alive. Niles arrives at the prison on the day of the race, and every participant is injected with a GPS tracker, so the showrunners can trace them and kill them if they attempt to escape. The Death Race episode begins with explaining that the race will be completed in the course of 3 stages, with 11 drivers competing. Liszt explains to Katrina the changes in the new car, stating that the desert has no shields available, and only offensive weapons can be acquired. Luke goes to Goldberg, saying that this race will be different from the one on Terminal Island, so he needs his help and regains Goldberg's trust. Goldberg warns him from Razor and Nero, as their sole purpose of entering the game is to kill Frankenstein, before urging him to be careful of Katrina, as she is still resentful about him faking his death. Just before the race, a racer named the Jackal makes a jump start, so Satana orders him to be blown up by a tracking missile which sets his car on fire, killing both the Jackal and his navigator. The race finally begins, and this time the death race features a female driver named Olga Braun, who faces trouble driving in the desert. However, one of the racers named Psycho is unable to even start his car for the first few minutes, while the rest move forward. Liszt urges Luke to only cross people during turns, as the roads are narrow, and Goldberg explains that desert racing isn't about speed, but rather handling the vehicle properly.
Weapons aren't active until... Racing isn't about speed.
The racers enter the sand dunes and get hostile upon seeing the weapon activation pressure points, as Luke and Razor move neck and neck. Razor pushes Luke's car and equips the weapons along with Olga, Nero, 14K, and Joker. Nero opens fire on 14K, who dodges the attacks, while Joker targets Luke with cannons. Goldberg tells Luke to stay as close to Joker's car as possible as the cannon can't hit short range, but List thinks it's irrational, so Goldberg orders Luke to make a sharp turn, causing Joker's car to flip over an unexpected dune and burst into flames.
Activated.
They enter a town and Razor finds weapon pressure points, while 14K struggles to find the track in the midst of multiple pathways. Another racer named Pretty Boy hits his car against Razor's, so Razor throws a missile at his car in retaliation. Pretty Boy's car gets destroyed, but he manages to get out in time and starts to run, so Satana orders a missile to kill him. Prudence protests that launching the missile would kill innocent people in the town, but Satana doesn't care and eliminates Pretty Boy. Razor then goes on to eliminate another player with his missile, leaving 7 drivers in the race. The drivers next pass through the warlords of Kalahari, who open fire on them, and List explains that they are responsible for 75% crime in the region. The pit crew tells Luke that he is in second place and needs to cross Razor before the finish line, but Razor wins just by a fraction of a second. Once they return, Luke tells Katrina that he lied to protect her, but she refuses to believe him and steps out. Just then, Goldberg notices Razor heading towards Luke with a knife and attacks him, which starts a brawl. Luke joins the fight and Satana quickly orders the guards to step in. But before they can stop the fight, Razor manages to cut Goldberg, making List scream for a doctor. However, Goldberg only gets a few stitches on his arm from the prison doctor named Olivia, and survives the attack. Later at night, Satana sends an inmate named Amber, who is Razor's navigator, as a prize for Frankenstein for coming in second place, which makes Katrina uneasy. On the other hand, Satana asks Niles to finalize the 3-year contract in which they will be holding 6 races every year, but Niles claims that he will discuss it after the second race, as he is shocked that Luke is complying instead of negotiating. The next morning, Luke tells his team that he was forced to make a deal to lose, but he has a secret plan. The second race begins with Nero leading, and Goldberg explains that there is only one weapon pressure point in 25 miles. However, if the person who equips it dies, the pressure point will be reactivated. So if Luke acquires the weapons, everyone will try to kill him. Luke rushes for the weapons, but Olga reaches them before him. Luke rams into Olga's car before another racer named Fury joins in attacking Olga, and Olga regrets acquiring the weapon. Fury pushes Olga's car till it's forced to move up a dune and flip over. But Olga quickly escapes it. She then stands in front of her car, while Fury reverses to run her over. But just before he can do so, she tricks him by launching a missile from her flipped car, causing Fury's car to explode, killing him. However, Razor arrives out of nowhere and crushes Olga with his car, eliminating her as well. The racers make their way to a town which is full of protesters, asking Death Race not to mistreat their roads. Razor asks Amber to use a flamethrower on Luke's car, while Psycho's car opens fire on Razor, destroying the town. Luke acquires weapons, circles his car, so he is behind Razor's and starts shooting at him using the car's machine gun. Meanwhile, 14K shoots a missile at Nero's car, causing it to flip, and Nero gets out alive, but he gets beaten to death by an angry mob. The rest move to the town of Warlords, and Luke acquires weapons before reaching the town, where he gets off the track, so Razor follows him, confusing Satana. Luke opens fire at the Warlords, causing them to retaliate and quickly get into their cars with weapons to attack Luke.
Go, go, go!
They follow him till Luke reaches his crew, where the stray bullets cause an explosion in Luke's pit stop. So they get out of the car and rush to find Goldberg unconscious, making Lists weep, while Olivia confirms Goldberg dead. Later, Niles visits Luke to remind him to lose his final race, pretending that it was because of a technical issue in the car, or he will have Katrina tortured. After he leaves, Psycho discusses with Luke how easy it is to replace Frankenstein, as they can kill several people and just put the suit on another human to have him pretend like he is the real Frankenstein. On the other hand, Satana finds out that Niles plans to replace her, which makes her furious, but Niles threatens to kill her and dismisses her. Meanwhile, Luke and Katrina finally reconcile and put their differences aside. The last day of the race arrives, and Niles is determined to keep Frankenstein from winning at any cost, so he orders the production team to cause as many hurdles as possible in his way. At the same time, Liszt worries about how to give instructions, as that was Goldberg's job, but manages to get a hold of it and explains to Luke about the sharp turns coming ahead. As the racers drive through a narrow path, Luke has the lead, and flames start emerging from the sides, distracting them.
The most dominant driver, can he hold on for one?
Once they reach Red Rock Road, they start speeding, and Razor rams into Luke's car to push it aside, and the two cars run parallel for a while before Razor pushes Luke away and activates the weapon pressure point. Luke speeds away, while Razor opens fire on Psycho, disabling his car, which soon burns and sets Psycho on fire. Despite getting out of the car on time, the remaining three racers head towards the finish line, where Luke activates weapons, making Prudence reveal that Luke is highly likely to win, as he has the lead and best weapons. Niles orders the missiles to be ready, but Satana protests, saying that if Frankenstein is killed in front of the entire world by the production team, no one will ever watch the show again. However, Niles angrily claims that it is his show, so he will decide what is better. Prudence explains that it will kill a lot of people, as Luke is close to the finishing line, so Niles fires her and sets off the missile. Liszt informs Luke of the missile, and 14K quickly orders his navigator to activate countermeasures. 14K shoots flares to divert the missile and make it hit the mountain nearby, saving Lucas's life and repaying his debt from the race back in Terminal Island, revealing that he knew Frankenstein was Luke all along. Both cars emerge from the smoke unharmed, making Niles curse out his own company for making faulty trackers. Luke thanks 14K for saving him, but before he can say more, Niles orders all the guards to kill Luke before he reaches the finish line. However, Frankenstein refuses to lose and retaliates against Niles and his forces. Just before reaching the finish line, Luke hits the brakes, making 14K cross him and win the death race. Luke instead heads towards the control room in his car, planning to kill anyone standing in the way of his freedom. Niles thinks of ways to escape, but Satana handcuffs him to a table for his betrayal. Luke and Katrina crash their car into the control room, and it explodes, engulfing the room in flames. Later that night, Satana announces the death of Niles and Katrina, as only Frankenstein made it out alive, making the press delighted that Frankenstein survived. Meanwhile, Prudence takes charge of the company in Niles' absence, returning Death Race to Terminal Island and assigning Warden Hennessy to oversee the races. Prudence then receives a call from the medical facility, where the surviving patient insists that he is Niles York rather than Frankenstein. However, Olivia, Liszt, and the GPS tracking chip all identify him as Frankenstein. On the other hand, Luke, Katrina, and Goldberg enjoy a vacation after Wayland transfers a large sum of money to Luke. In a flashback, it is revealed that this was Luke's revenge plan all along, with Wayland providing Olivia as an insider who helped fake Goldberg's death. He had ordered Satana to trap Niles in the room while Luke and Katrina had escaped their car before the crash. Once the badly injured and disfigured Niles was taken to the hospital, Olivia injected the GPS device of Frankenstein's ID into Niles' body. Wayland regains control of the death race and grants the team their freedom, but Liszt refuses to join their escape, as he claims that he had trouble adjusting to the outside world and feels much more comfortable in the prison, so he is transferred to Terminal Island. Meanwhile, Wayland mocks Niles, claiming that Death Race is nothing without Frankenstein, so Niles has no choice but to act as the man behind the masks for the sake of the show. Niles decides to wear the mask, wishing to gain his freedom and have his revenge while racing at Terminal Island. Death Race begins in a future where the American economy has collapsed. Unemployment is at an all-time high, and crime is spreading across the country. With prisons overcrowded, private corporations take control of the correctional system and begin running it for profit. At Terminal Island Penitentiary, cage fights streamed online become a massive success, but viewers soon demand even greater levels of violence. In response, the prison creates the Death Race, a brutal competition where inmates drive weaponized vehicles and fight for a chance to earn their freedom. In today's race, only 2 cars are still left. One is driven by the legendary Frankenstein with his navigator case beside him. The other is driven by Frank's oldest rival, Machine Gun Joe. Both drivers are close to the finish line and are willing to do anything to win. But for some reason, the weapons in Frank's car are not working. With no other choice, Frank improvises by releasing the car's rear shield. It slams into Joe's car and gives Frank a brief advantage, but Joe is still not finished and still has the upper hand with his weapons. Case realizes Joe is about to destroy them and wants to escape, but Frank refuses to let Joe win. So Case ejects herself from the car just as Frank reaches the finish line. At the same moment, Joe fires at him, causing Frank to win the race but explode in the process. Some days later, industrial worker and ex-convict Jensen Ames learns that the steel mill where he works is shutting down. To make things worse, the company is not even paying the workers the full amount they are owed. The workers quickly become angry, and the anti-riot police arrive to control the situation. When the officers begin beating people over the smallest provocation, Jensen sees his co-workers getting hurt and jumps into the fight, attacking some of the officers in return. By the time Jensen gets home, night has already fallen. He greets his wife, then goes upstairs to check on their baby. However, he does not realize that a masked man has used this chance to break into the house. While Jensen is upstairs, the intruder murders his wife. When Jensen returns to the kitchen, the masked man knocks him unconscious. He then places the murder weapon in Jensen's hand and leaves after making a shooting gesture with his gloved hand. Moments later, Jensen wakes up to find the police surrounding him, and he is arrested for the murder of his wife. 6 months later, Jensen is transferred to Terminal Island Prison. When he arrives, he is received by guard Ulrich, who sprays him with freezing water and allows another officer to mock him. After that, Jensen is taken to a cell with 3 other prisoners, who immediately prepare to beat him up. Ulrich comes to check on Jensen, clearly hoping to enjoy seeing him in trouble. However, Jensen is a strong fighter, and by the time Ulrich arrives, all 3 of his cellmates have already been knocked out. The next morning, Jensen goes to the chow hall for breakfast while Coach, Gunnar, and Lists watch him from another table. List recognizes him as a former record-holding driver whose career came to an end. The hall suddenly falls silent when Pachenko and his friend walk over to Jensen and start provoking him. First, Pachenko spits on his food, then he begins insulting Jensen in front of the other inmates. Jensen loses control and attacks Pachenko, beating him down in front of everyone. However, the fight is quickly stopped by the guards, who take Jensen away to meet Claire Hennessy, the prison warden. Hennessy has already looked into Jensen's record and knows he is an excellent driver. Because of this, she makes him an offer. She wants him to become the new Frankenstein. The real Frankenstein died on the operating table after his last race, but nobody outside the prison knows this yet. Since he always wears a mask, anyone can replace him without the audience finding out. Frankenstein was a favorite among the viewers and had become a powerful legend. That is why Hennessy does not want the world to know he is dead. She needs the legend to continue so the ratings can recover, because they have dropped badly since the real Frank died. The rules of Death Race say that any driver who wins 5 races earns their freedom. Since Frankenstein had already won 4 races, Jensen would only need to win 1 more to be released. Jensen is still unsure about risking his life, but Hennessy threatens to put him in solitary confinement if he refuses, making sure he cannot tell anyone her secret. With no real choice left, Jensen agrees. After that, Jensen is taken to the prison's auto shop, where he is introduced to Coach and his men. They are the mechanics responsible for Frankenstein's car, and they begin teaching Jensen the basics. Each team has its own pit, and no team helps another. There is also a large workshop where Hennessy has been secretly building something for the past month. Only Jensen's team and a small number of guards will know that he is the new Frankenstein because Hennessy has complete control over the prison. Coach then shows Jensen the car he will be driving. Modified Mustang V8 Fastback. It is fitted with several defensive and offensive weapons, but it is not loaded with ammunition until race day, so the prisoners cannot use it to escape. Escaping would be almost impossible anyway, because the prison is located on an island. The only way out is across a small bridge, and at the first sign of a prison break, it would be surrounded by police cars and helicopters. Once Jensen becomes familiar with the car, he and the team continue talking in the prison yard. Coach explains that the race has 3 stages. During the first 2 stages, Jensen needs to eliminate as many opponents as possible. During the 3rd stage, the main goal is speed because that is when he must reach the finish line. Every driver has a navigator beside them, and these navigators are women brought in from the women's prison. The only exception is Joe, who prefers to use one of his own crew members as a navigator instead. List then begins telling Jensen about the most important drivers who are all in the yard with them. There is 14K, a Triad member and MIT graduate. There is Hector Grimm, a violent psychopath who adores Hennessy. There is Slovo Pachenko, the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood inside the prison. Then there is Travis Colt, a disgraced former NASCAR star. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted when Joe and his team walk over to insult Jensen. Joe also leaves a message for Frankenstein, making it clear that this race is only between the 2 of them. At that moment, a van returns with some inmates who have been doing work detail. Jensen notices something unusual on their wrists. They are wearing GPS tracking bracelets, and the sight of them makes him realize something important. The man who killed his wife was wearing one as well. When the first stage of the race finally gets underway, Jensen is given Frankenstein's clothes, mask, and even his ring. As soon as he appears, the viewers who had left the show quickly return. Coach tells Jensen not to speak to the other drivers because the real Frankenstein never did, and that silence was part of his mystery. However, Jensen is allowed to remove the mask inside the car because the windows are made from mirrored glass, and Case already knows the truth. While they prepare for the race, Jensen asks Case why she is in prison. She tells him she killed her husband, who was a police officer. The race begins a moment later. Since the weapons do not activate until the second of the 3 laps, the start is not as deadly as it could be. Even so, the drivers still try to force each other off the track. Thanks to Case's knowledge of the course, Jensen is able to stay close to Joe at the front. He even manages to pass him and take first place when Case points out a shortcut. Hennessy then activates the shields and weapons. These are triggered by metal plates on the ground, and a driver must pass over them with all 4 wheels to activate their car's gadgets. Soon, the track becomes a battlefield as the drivers open fire on each other. When Hennessy activates the death heads as well, Grimm uses one to kill a driver by forcing his car into it. He also causes Joe to fall behind by spraying oil at his car. However, Grimm's race comes to an end when 14K pushes him off the track with a missile and Joe runs him over. Meanwhile, Jensen manages to activate his weapons, but the machine gun jams before he can use it properly. Case quickly climbs onto the hood of the car to fix it, which causes the other drivers to aim their bullets directly at her. However, Jensen's driving skills allow him to dodge every shot, and Case safely returns to the passenger seat. Jensen then steals a defense plate from Colt, But just like what happened to the real Frankenstein, none of his defensive systems work. To make things worse, the rear shield is already badly damaged and will not last much longer. Jensen quickly comes up with a risky plan. He has Case move over so he can detach her seat and connect it to the car's napalm system. He then ejects the seat directly into Colt's car, coating it in napalm. Case then ignites the fuel, setting the vehicle on fire and taking Colt out of the race. With Colt gone, Jensen goes head-to-head with Joe again. However, he suddenly becomes distracted when Pachenko makes the same hand gesture that the man who killed his wife made before leaving the house. Joe uses this moment to his advantage and pushes Jensen's car back, causing him to finish in last place, while Pachenko comes first. By the end of the race, 3 drivers are dead, and only 6 are left for the second stage. Afterward, Coach and his men inspect the car and realize that the gadgets are working properly. This means there is no clear reason why they failed during the race when Jensen needed them. Jensen then goes to see Hennessy and tells her he refuses to race anymore. He now knows Pachenko killed his wife, and he believes the whole thing was planned to frame him so Hennessy could bring him into the prison and use him as the new Frankenstein. Hennessy does not admit to anything, but she shows him a picture of his daughter in the foster home where she has been placed. She makes it clear that if Jensen ever wants to see his daughter again, he needs to keep playing along. With no way to fight back for now, Jensen returns to the yard and speaks with Coach. He asks why Coach does not wear a prison number. Coach explains that technically he is no longer supposed to be a prisoner. He qualified for parole 3 years ago, but when the time came he could not bring himself to walk through the gate. The outside world had changed too much, and the races had become the only life he understood. Coach also tells Jensen that he does not believe he killed his wife. Later that evening, while Jensen is working on the car, he sees Pachenko walking past and decides to follow him back to his pit. However, Pachenko's team is ready for him, and Jensen is quickly captured. Pachenko punches him several times, then grabs a heavy tool and prepares to smash his head, not caring that Jensen is under Hennessy's protection. Before he can do it, List suddenly steps in and stabs Pachenko in the back with a pen. Jensen uses the distraction to grab a sharp piece of metal from the ground and stab the man holding him. He then knocks that man and his friend out before going after Pachenko. Jensen punches him, throws him around the pit, and smashes him into several boxes until Pachenko finally admits the truth. Hennessy ordered him to kill Jensen's wife, and Ulrich was the guard who brought him there. Jensen prepares to kill Pachenko in revenge, but before he can do it, Ulrich arrives with another guard and stops the fight. The next day, right before the second stage of the race begins, Pachenko tries to provoke Jensen again by making the same hand gesture as before. However, Jensen does not fall for it this time. Instead, once the race starts, he purposely drives slowly and takes the car into a tunnel so he can speak to Case in private. Jensen tells Case that he finds it suspicious that Frankenstein's car has had problems in 2 races in a row. He asks if she killed the real Frank and threatens to eject her from the car if she does not answer. Case finally admits that she sabotaged Frank's rear weapons because Hennessy promised to reward her with her freedom. However, she explains that the plan was never meant to kill him. Frank's death was an accident caused by him still trying to win even though his weapons were not working. Hennessy only wanted Frank to lose so he would stay in prison and keep racing for the audience. Now that Jensen has his answer, he speeds up and easily returns to the race. For the moment, he ignores Joe because his real target is Pachenko. Jensen and Pachenko begin fighting for position, and both of them try to force the other off the track. When that does not work, Jensen drives ahead and chooses a weapon plate instead of a defense plate. This confuses everyone because the weapons are mounted at the front of the car. However, Jensen surprises them by suddenly turning the car around and driving backwards. He then opens fire on Pachenko while still racing in reverse. After damaging Pachenko's car enough, Jensen turns his own car around again and drives through the smoke. This causes Pachenko to crash straight into a concrete barrier. Jensen then stops the car and gets out. He walks over to Pachenko, and in revenge for the murder of his wife, he breaks his neck. Between this and Joe deciding to change his navigator in the middle of the race, Hennessy decides it is the right time to release the machine she has been secretly building. It is a heavily armed tanker truck called the Dreadnought. The truck is extremely powerful and quickly catches up with the remaining drivers. It immediately kills 2 competitors and keeps moving through the course. Since the vehicle belongs to the warden, it is also allowed to drive through the prison buildings, which lets it take a shortcut and appear at the front of the race. The Dreadnought then kills 14K's navigator before grabbing 14K's car with chains. It fires at the vehicle until it explodes, leaving only Jensen and Joe in the race. There's no way for them to defeat such a powerful machine without a proper plan. So Jensen tells List to connect his communicator to Joe's car. The two drivers then agree to work together. Jensen and Joe flank the dreadnought with their cars while doing everything they can to dodge its attacks. When a trap plate appears in front of them, they each drive over it with 2 wheels, giving them the 4 wheels needed to activate it. This causes the trap to rise from the ground and the dreadnought crashes straight into it. With that, the second stage of the race comes to an end. Jensen and Joe are now the only drivers who will move on to the third and final stage. Later that evening, Joe comes over to Jensen's pit and points out that his voice sounds suspiciously similar to Frank's. However, he does not push for answers. Meanwhile, Ulrich and Hennessy decide that Jensen has become too much of a problem. Since the Frankenstein mask can always be worn by someone else in the future, they decide that Jensen needs to be killed. The next day, before the race begins, Ulrich secretly places a bomb underneath Jensen's car. At the same time, Hennessy distracts everyone by giving a speech about how racing is their purpose in life. During the speech, she mentions that this could be the first time a driver wins his freedom with a 5th victory. Hearing this makes Jensen realize the truth. The races are always rigged to stop anyone from reaching that 5th win, which is why nobody has ever earned their freedom before. This also means Hennessy has no intention of letting him win today. Coach hears Jensen come to this conclusion. Once they are allowed back into the auto shop, he shows Jensen an important detail from the video of Grimm's death. This gives Jensen an idea for a plan, and he tells List to add a half-gallon reserve tank to his car. After that, he goes to Joe's pit and asks him to work with him again. While Jensen is changing into Frankenstein's clothes, Hennessy comes to visit him. She gives him his release papers, but then makes him a new offer. If he wins, she wants him to stay in prison and continue being Frankenstein, because she believes the track is where he truly belongs. She tells him he is not suited to be a father, and that an ex-convict could never give his daughter a good life. According to her, choosing to stay in prison would be a selfless act of love. Jensen does not give her an answer, but he does place the release papers in his pocket before heading to the race. When he gets into the car, Case admits that Hennessy also spoke to her. She was told to stop Jensen if he came close to winning, but Jensen does not seem worried. As soon as the race begins, Ulrich starts controlling the track plates so they only activate when Joe drives over them. Joe gets his weapons first and opens fire on Jensen, damaging his rear shield so badly that Jensen decides to release it from the car. However, Joe easily dodges the shield because he already learned that trick when the real Frank tried it before. To keep the viewers interested, Hennessy activates a defense plate for Jensen to use. However, Joe fires a rocket at it and destroys it before Jensen can reach it. Joe still has more rockets left, and he launches them at Jensen one after another. Jensen dodges each shot and lets the rockets hit a nearby wall instead. This is the same wall behind Grimm when he died, and it was already weakened by that earlier explosion. Jensen and Joe have been aiming their attacks at that weak spot the whole time, and now the rockets finally break through it. The wall opens up, giving them a way to escape the prison. Furious, Hennessy immediately ends the stream and sends every available officer after them. She then presses the bomb detonator, but nothing happens. Coach and his men had already removed the bomb from Jensen's car and deactivated it. Joe and Jensen make it to the bridge, but the police cars are quickly closing in behind them. This is when Jensen uses the next part of his plan. He releases the extra half-gallon reserve tank from his car, and it hits the police vehicles behind them. The impact causes an explosion and creates a wall of fire, stopping the cars from continuing the chase. Both prisoners manage to get through the bridge gates before taking separate roads. The helicopters choose to follow Jensen because, as Frankenstein, he is the more important target. As Joe drives away, Case agrees to help Jensen with the final part of his plan. She believes she owes it to the original Frankenstein, and since Hennessy already gave her release papers, the prison will still be forced to let her go. When they drive past some construction cranes, Jensen jumps out of the car under the shadows and hides there. Case then takes his place behind the wheel. She only manages to drive a few more miles before the helicopters stop her with a wall of fire. However, when she steps out of the car with her hands up, she is wearing Frankenstein's clothes and mask. Because most people do not know about the identity switch, the officers arrest Case and take her back to the prison. This allows Jensen to escape and meet up with Joe, and the two of them board a freight train together. Back at the prison office, Ulrich tells Hennessy that the ratings are extremely high and that congratulation gifts have already started arriving. Hennessy opens the gift box he brings in and finds the same bomb Ulrich had placed under Jensen's car. A moment later, it explodes, killing both of them. Outside on the track, Coach is revealed to be the one who pressed the detonator. 6 months later, Joe and Jensen have built a new life in Santa Rosalia, Mexico. They now work together as mechanics in their own auto shop, and Jensen has regained custody of his daughter. Case also visits them after her release papers are finally processed, bringing a racing car with her for them to inspect. Death Race Beyond Anarchy begins when the crime rate in the US increases to a new high, resulting in multiple cities becoming centers for violence. So the government eventually builds a containment wall, enclosing 138 square miles of a factory town. Wayland International gets the contract to maintain the largest privately run penitentiary known as the Sprawl, where convicts revere Death Race as they consider it the only way to rule the prison. Within the containment zone, Death Race is considered immoral and is made illegal, as the racers do not care about the rights of locals. However, the race continues with missiles destroying the surroundings, cars flipping and exploding, while being broadcast live on the dark web. The warden orders his cybersecurity manager to cut the connections off, but she explains that they are highly encoded, directly linked with the satellite, and will take her at least 2 months. Meanwhile, Lists oversees the Death Race now as he started to stream it on the dark web, and explains that Frankenstein will be winning his 7th consecutive race. But this is resulting in low business, as no one is betting on anyone else, so they need a challenger desperately. On the other hand, Frankenstein pushes his opponent's car into the wall of a tunnel until it loses control and explodes. The warden sends a SWAT team to take Frankenstein out and end the death race. Elsewhere, Goldberg is in a casino when a woman rushes in, informing him that someone wants to place a huge bet that the SWAT team will eliminate Frankenstein, and Goldberg places an even larger bet that Frankenstein will survive. Frankenstein wins the race and heads to the inmates, who are celebrating, when the SWAT team opens fire, killing several people while the rest try to escape. The team moves inside the building, killing 2 inmates who try to attack them. But they find themselves surrounded by armed prisoners once they reach the main hall. Frankenstein comes out and signals the men, who shoot the entire SWAT team dead before they can open fire on Frankenstein. A few inmates come out to deal with the defeated SWAT team, while Frankenstein sends a message to the warden through one of the men's helmet cameras, warning that anyone sent after him will meet the same fate. The current owner of Wayland International, named Mr. Valentine, warns the warden that the government is appealing to take back the Sprawl, unless they shut down Frankenstein. He angrily scolds him for being unable to stop Death Race, and tells him to eliminate him from inside the Sprawl, claiming that the masked Frankenstein must die publicly during a Death Race match, so they can take back the power from him. Later, a helicopter of new prisoners arrives, and the guard explains that they will be handed a silver coin each so they can survive in the prison. As most inmates are brutal, one of them asks how to get into Death Race, and the guard tells her to find a man named Baltimore Bob as he runs the operations. Upon landing, a prison gang run by death racer Johnny Law, nicknamed the Cops, opens fire on the new prisoners, killing most of them before the police bulletproof car can arrive to transport the prisoners to their cells. When only 2 are left, the gang surrounds them and demands their silver coins, but one of them, named Gypsy Rose, refuses, claiming that Johnny doesn't have any more bullets left. He fires in the air before pointing his gun at her, but Rose pushes away the gun before kicking him. The other alive inmate, named Connor, quickly joins the fight, attacking the gang and knocking them all out. Rose quickly grabs the gun and tells Connor that she doesn't owe him anything before leaving. Connor suddenly gets surrounded by a bunch of women, and he tells them that he is looking for Bob, so their leader, named Bexy, gives him a ride. Meanwhile, in Frankenstein's bar, Frankenstein is angry that Johnny failed to get all the silver coins from the new inmates and is about to kill him when Connor enters the bar. Bexy introduces Connor to the bartender named Jane, who asks him why he was sent to prison, but he refuses to answer. Suddenly, he is attacked by two thugs, and Connor punches one while smashing a glass on the other's head. They get in an intense fight, and Connor knocks one down before tackling the other and nearly snapping his neck, but Frankenstein jumps in. Frankenstein accuses him of stealing, but Connor claims that he was attacked first, prompting Frankenstein to angrily warn Connor that the sprawl is his city, and he must follow his orders if he wants to survive. After that, Bob approaches Connor asking him if he drives, and explains that he was an oncologist who was convicted after helping hundreds of terminally ill patients end their suffering. Suddenly, they see people surrounding a truck, and Bob explains that Frankenstein hijacks all food that comes into the containment zone and supplies it in small amounts so the people are easily controlled. Frankenstein's men open fire on people taking the food, killing most. While a few manage to escape, Bob takes Connor to a death match, explaining that only those who win can get a spot in Death Race, and Connor notices that Rose is already participating in it. Lists explains that the host is Carly, a convicted criminal. The match begins, in which 5 participants engage in a bike race, and all those who fall are killed by the mob. Rose jumps off her motorcycle, making it hit the final opponent, who falls, and then she stabs him to death, winning the participation in Death Race. After that, Jane spends some time with Connor and explains how she ended up in prison after killing her husband. During their conversation, she tries to learn more about him, but Connor remains distant, causing Jane to leave disappointed. The next morning, List walks Connor through the place where Bob produces fuel for the cars, explaining that Bob provides high-octane fuel and car repair for the Death Race, while Frankenstein reciprocates by giving them protection and better food. They reach Bob, who asks Connor if he is sure about joining the game, as he would need to murder people brutally and ensure that it doesn't haunt him, but Connor confirms that he wants to join the race. Bob tells him to come prepared for his qualifying match, saying that the rules will be explained later. At night, all convicts gather for the event of deathmatch, while Lists calls Goldberg and urges him to tune in for the match, as he believes Connor can be a challenge for Frankenstein. Lists also asks for more ammo to be added in the next shipment, and Goldberg tells him not to worry. Carly explains the rules to the participants, explaining that the qualifying match is a race to a tower, which the winner must climb to claim the keys to a car. The race begins, and all contenders start running towards the tower, but the producers blast a few tires, killing one man while Connor falls. The mob starts attacking the people who fall, but Connor puts up a fight and breaks the arm of the man who attacks him. A woman rushes towards him with a knife, but he bends her arm and kicks her in the face, knocking her out before rushing towards the key and grabbing it. The people cheer for him. And he fights the last men from the production team, easily defeating them. Frankenstein next sends the Butcher, a man carrying a sledgehammer and a sickle, but Connor dodges his attacks and lands a few punches. He eventually lands a kick on Butcher's face, but Butcher overpowers him, making Connor fall. Just as Butcher is about to crush him with the hammer, Connor grabs Butcher's hand and kicks him, stealing the hammer. Connor then hits both of Butcher's knees with it before making the final hit to his head, killing him and making the crowd scream. Frankenstein tells Carly to bring Connor to him, so she visits him later, but he rejects all her advances. She warns him that he won't be able to handle Frankenstein, but Connor doesn't listen to her and heads to Frankenstein, who asks him about his opinion on the sprawl. Connor explains that the place is suffering from anarchy, so Frankenstein asks if Connor can handle being the king of the sprawl. But Connor claims that he only wants to race. Frankenstein explains that when he arrived, the entire area was a wasteland, as Wayland International considered the sprawl as an alternative to the death penalty, but he ensured that the people lived their lives without any governance. Frankenstein tells him that if he wins the death race, he will become king of the sprawl, claiming that if Connor doesn't have the motivation to rule, then he will simply die on the track. Once he gets out, Bexy comes to pick him up and expresses the desire to be Connor's navigator, as Frankenstein has killed several loved ones of hers, so she wants revenge, but Connor is hesitant. He heads to Jane's apartment and opens up to her, revealing his life story, that he spent his childhood in Texas and his sister died while he was in the army. He doesn't tell her why he is in prison but claims to have done really bad things, and the two decide to start a relationship. The next day, Bob shows Connor his car, saying that it will need a lot of repair, and shows him the bulletproof titanium plate called the Tombstone, which will cover his fuel tank. Bob asks if Connor has a navigator yet, and Bexy shows up saying that she will be participating with him, so Connor reluctantly agrees. Bexy and her girls help in rebuilding the car according to Bob's instructions, and Connor takes it for a test drive once it's ready. Bob explains that it will be a one-day race, beginning and ending at the same point. After that, the racers will enter Interstate 94, which is a long stretch, so most of the inexperienced racers will be killed before they cross the road, and those who survive will move to the projects, where the racers will be targeted by the worst of inmates. The night before the death race, Connor visits Jane, revealing that he has nothing left outside the prison. Since his sister was his last human connection, after she died, he turned to crime, but now Jane has given him a reason to live again. The next morning, Connor notices all the prisoners surrounding Jane's apartment, screaming that they are here to kill them. So he heads downstairs. Frankenstein steps forward and confronts Connor, revealing to the prison that he is actually Sergeant Connor Gibson, a special operative sent inside to kill him. Frankenstein explains that once Connor murders him today, a helicopter will arrive to take him out of the prison, warning the people that they will have no leader, which will result in Wayland International controlling them like rats. The prisoners ask Frankenstein to kill Connor immediately, but Frankenstein says he will let Connor race. If he wins, the prisoners will have to accept their fate. The crowd disperses, and Jane asks Connor if he is really an undercover agent, but he doesn't reply, so she angrily storms back inside. Bob says that he will be working as Connor's pit crew because he believes Connor is good for business, and tells Bexy to support him despite her anger. Later, Carly takes over hosting as the match is about to begin, and she introduces the racers. Frankenstein arrives and forces Jane into the passenger seat of his car, saying he will be using her as an insurance policy and urging Connor to show the world how cold-blooded he is. The race begins with Connor and Frankenstein being neck and neck, so Frankenstein smashes the side of his car into Connor's. Meanwhile, a participant named Cleopatra opens fire on Rose's car, so she launches a missile that flips Cleopatra's car and kills her, leaving 10 players in the race. Another racer named Dirt in his war cycle starts shooting at Connor, so Bexy throws grenades and kills him. Meanwhile, Goldberg watches and places a bet on Connor. Back in the race, they enter Deadlands, and a fireman attacks the car of a woman with his truck, and Matilda's navigator shoots the racer dead. On the other hand, Bexy tells Connor that they can blow up Frankenstein's car using their missile because he is in perfect range, but Connor orders her not to do it, as it will kill Jane. The rest are confronted by the crime lords of the area, so Johnny opens fire from his machine gun on them, eliminating them. However, the rest come forward with a missile and hit 2 cars, killing Matilda and Pierced Face, leaving only 6 players in the race. The fireman attacks Connor using the mounted weapons on his heavily armored truck, the Ram Hemi, forcing Connor to pick up speed. However, the fireman takes a shortcut and manages to hook Connor's car with a cable. Bexy throws grenades at the truck but misses, allowing the fireman to keep pursuing them. Connor then drives into a nearby building, causing the fireman and his navigator to get out with an axe and continue the chase on foot. However, Connor had already spilled fuel along the route and ignites it with a lighter, setting them on fire. Bexy then gets out of the car and finishes them off before Connor cuts the cable with the fireman's axe and drives away. They soon enter the projects, where Frankenstein remains in first place while Rose stays close behind, determined to take the lead. Johnny is third, while Nazi Bastard is fourth. However, Nazi's car crosses a planted mine, which causes his car to blow up and crash, making it unfit for the race. Nazi steps out, screaming to find the one who installed the bomb, so a few men come forward, saying that they are part of the group Nazi shot while distributing the food and are now here for revenge. Meanwhile, Bob connects with Connor to reveal that he is far behind and he will need to reroute to the bridge to close the gap if he wants to win. Connor quickly changes his path and finds Nazi and his navigator hanged publicly by the locals. Lists explains that if Connor is traveling at a speed of 220 miles per hour, he will be able to jump the gap in the bridge, but Connor explains that his car accelerates at 200 miles per hour, but Bob tells him to push and he might be able to cross. Connor catches up to Johnny, and Bexy shoots the man who is operating Johnny's machine gun before killing his navigator. Johnny's car falls off the bridge and explodes, making the audience scream with happiness. Connor tells Bexy to get out of the car, but she refuses and drops the tombstone so their car can be a bit lighter. Connor takes the risk and drives off the bridge, successfully making it to the other side. Connor reaches right behind Frankenstein and connects with him, saying that they should finish the race based on driving skills instead of shooting, and Frankenstein agrees. In the last stretch, Connor again moves parallel to Frankenstein and hits his car's side to push him away, but Frankenstein pushes through. Connor manages to take the lead, so Frankenstein opens fire on his car, but Connor suddenly stops as his car runs out of fuel. Connor gets out to realize that his fuel line has ruptured, but Frankenstein turns around and Jane begs him not to kill Connor. However, Frankenstein claims that Connor stepped into death race knowing the consequences, so now Connor must die and he drives at them. Bexy aims a missile at Frankenstein's car, but it misses, and Frankenstein rushes forward only for Rose to crash her car into his. Connor rushes to pull Jane out while Bob urges List to cut all the broadcasts, as the warden wants Frankenstein to die on camera, but if that happens, the prisoners of Sprawl will lose all power. Rose rushes and shoots Frankenstein multiple times, ensuring that he has died, before telling Connor that a chopper will be here soon to pick them up, revealing that she is also an undercover agent. Rose thanks him for becoming the center of attention, as that allowed her to work without any suspicion. Rose gets on the chopper while Connor looks at Jane, feeling conflicted, and eventually decides to stay. Bob orders Connor to push Frankenstein out and wear the mask, as the Sprawl will turn to chaos without Frankenstein. Connor wears Frankenstein's coat and mask, turning into the new Frankenstein before finishing the race. List turns on the broadcast again and claims that Goldberg will be pissed, as he placed all his bets on Connor while the inmates celebrate the win of Frankenstein, not knowing it's Connor. We now go back to the original timeline, where Death Race 2000 opens after massive civil unrest and economic ruin have devastated the United States, causing the country to be restructured into a totalitarian state ruled under martial law. To keep the public under control, the government hosts the Transcontinental Road Race, a cross-country competition where drivers speed across the nation. The 20th annual race is held with the host Junior Bruce introducing Jane Calamity Jane Kelly, the winner of the Watkins trials, who led last year's second lap until she went out with gear trouble. Meanwhile, a reporter welcomes Frankenstein, the greatest racer of all time, but he is brought in on a stretcher as the doctor claims it will facilitate the healing of Frankenstein's latest limb transplant. The reporters question if Frankenstein's robotic arm can shift gears faster, and if he would be able to adjust to a navigator he has never met, but he doesn't reply. On the other hand, Bruce presents the third participant, Matilda the Hun, along with her Nazi navigator Herman the German Spock. Soon, they are joined by Nero the hero and his navigator Cleopatra, who have never finished the race. Elsewhere, Frankenstein meets his navigator, Annie, who claims she has checked the car and packed adrenaline capsules along with a medical kit, as she is a trained nurse, but Frankenstein doesn't care. Bruce introduces the last participant, Joe Machine Gun Viterbo, who placed second in last year's race and is determined to defeat Frankenstein. Finally, Frankenstein arrives, with Bruce explaining that Frankenstein is the only two-time indestructible winner of the Transcontinental race, as he lost his leg in the 1998 race, and arm in 1999 but is still participating in the 2000 race. Mr. President's speech is broadcast, in which he claims that since the world crash of 1979 he has considered it his sole duty to serve his people, and he finally signals the start of the race, making all cars pick up speed. The commentator explains that there will be two 12-hour pit stops in the three-day race, and currently Joe and Frankenstein are neck and neck for first place. The cars take their preferred routes, with Frankenstein heading west, Jane going northwest, and Joe streaking southwest. Nero follows Frankenstein while Matilda follows Joe, and another speech by Mr. President is showcased, in which he claims that he made America a superpower. A group decides to violently rebel against the president, as their passive resistance has not been addressed. But the group is led by Annie's great-grandmother Thomasina Paine, who claims that the president will call off the race to protect Frankenstein, so she urges them to wait as Annie will finish the task on her own. On the other hand, Annie wonders if Frankenstein ever takes off his mask, but he reveals that he is patched up with steel, so he prefers to cover himself completely. However, he allows Annie to see his face on her own risk, but she is shocked to see it clear of any damage. Meanwhile, Joe runs over a guy who comes in his path, killing him and being the first one to get points for this race.
All right, and yes sirree! A clean hit, a perfect hit, and no pain for the target.
The commentator notes that fewer people are out on the roads, which could lead to lower scores for the racers. He goes on to explain the scoring system, that hitting a woman earns 10 more points than hitting a man. Teenagers are worth 40 points, and anything younger than that are worth 70 points, and people over 75 years old yield the highest reward of 100 points. Elsewhere, Jane comes across a man with a maleta, and she eventually manages to stab him with the horns attached to her car.
thrill kill, a neat kill.
Frankenstein drives to the geriatrics hospital, where the elderly are lined up for racers to kill, as the hospital has lined them up for free points. But Frankenstein purposely misses them and attacks the doctors, scoring 110 points.
Frankenstein scores at last. But what kind of a score, boys and girls? Just 110 points out of a possible big 700.
Payne believes that Annie saved the elderly, but her group members still consider it brutal that the doctors were killed. So Payne's grandson, Lieutenant Fury, claims that his resistance operations are underway despite Payne's disapproval. Later, Nero spots a family having a picnic and rushes to attack them. So the mother takes her children and runs, leaving behind a bomb disguised as a newborn baby. When Nero reaches the baby, the bomb explodes, killing him and his navigator. Bruce doesn't know how to comment on this, so he broadcasts a reporter named Grace Pander visiting the widow of the man Joe killed and congratulating her on winning a high-style apartment. However, the connection is cut by Payne, who introduces herself as the commander of the resistance and addresses the Americans, saying that the elimination of Nero is the people's first strike against the president's corrupt regime, finally declaring war against him. Annie asks Frankenstein about his stance on the speech, but he claims that he only cares about winning the race. The cars start heading to their first pit stop and Joe is in first place, so he notices a man hanging a banner for Frankenstein and Joe crushes him for more points. During the stop, everyone is taken in for massages, where the manager orders them to say nothing about Nero's death, as the government plans to pin the blame on the French. Frankenstein notices Joe talking to Annie, so he sits with Joe's navigator Myra, which makes all the press ask her what he was saying. She explains that he said nothing, but Joe gets furious and punches her. Later, a girl named Lori visits Frankenstein, telling him that she loves him, but he dismisses her and heads to Annie's room to ask her why she was with Joe, so she explains that she was giving him wrong directions. Frankenstein apologizes for the misunderstanding and Annie is shocked, but Frankenstein asks her for a dance and the scene moves on. The next morning as the race begins, Frankenstein accidentally drops his glove and while rushing back to pick it he hits the priest, scoring 50 points. The commentator announces that the other racers will now be aiming for the officials, who are helping the race proceed smoothly, as their murders will be added to the scorecard. Frankenstein comes across Lori, who stands in the middle of the road and lets Frankenstein run her over to prove her love for him. Meanwhile, Joe scores a few more points before taking the turn Annie told him to take, thinking it won't cause him much harm. On the other hand, Annie tells Frankenstein to take the route going down the road for a score possibility, where Payne is waiting with her men to eliminate Frankenstein and replace him with a member of the resistance. However, their setup is flawed, and Frankenstein runs over the guy dressed like him and continues with the race, thinking it was Joe's move against him. He stops the car and asks Annie to drive for a while, telling her to make as many points as possible. On the other hand, Joe reaches the dead end, realizing he has wasted 45 minutes, and drives into the lake to kill the man who confuses him with Frankenstein. Meanwhile, Matilda runs over Jane's navigator Pete, who is fixing the tire, so Jane rushes after them.
It's big! You lousy bitch! I'll kill you for that!
The resistance fighters set up a fake detour and Matilda follows it, which leads her to drive off a cliff and die.
I really needed that right now!
However, Bruce is given a page which orders him to make the false claim that Matilda has made a score and not report her death. Elsewhere, Annie comes across a child and Frankenstein asks her to make the score, but she acts like she missed him and drives away. He threatens to kill her, making her reveal that she is driving him around just to waste his time. He tells her to get in the car and demands to know her motive, so she reveals that she is Payne's great-granddaughter, and they plan to replace him, so the resistance fighter can demand Mr. President to stop the race in exchange for Frankenstein's life. But Frankenstein only laughs. Later, at the pit stop, Joe demands protection for drivers from the resistance fighters, but the manager tells him to quit if he is afraid. The manager lies that Payne walked into a TV station with a gun and forced them to broadcast her, but now she has been taken to a mental asylum. Joe angrily throws sauce at the manager, but the manager reminds them that he is the representative of the government, and he can have any of them killed within a second. A government official calls Frankenstein out and asks him if he took the route on his own initiative, or if Annie took him to the resistance fighters. So he lies that it was his own choice. The president addresses the people and claims it was the French who are also blamed for ruining the country's economy and telephone system. Meanwhile, Annie heads to the car but finds Joe in the parking lot, who grabs her hand and urges her to scream, saying no one will hear when he harms her. He starts strangling her, but before Joe can kill her, Frankenstein arrives, and the two get into a fight. Joe punches Frankenstein, but Frankenstein manages to overpower him and eventually subdue him. Later, Frankenstein reveals that he was brought up in a government training center along with some others who are prepared to race as Frankenstein, and each time one dies, they secretly replace him so that Frankenstein appears to be indestructible. He claims this is why no one has seen Frankenstein, and that the public blindly believes one man has continued to live despite serious injuries. The next morning, Jane claims that because of the uncertain circumstances, she wants to thank Frankenstein, as it was lovely to fight with someone competitive. She goes to tell Joe the same, but he dismisses her. As he is bothered by people laughing at his bruises, the race begins and Joe reverses into his own pit crew to score 40 points. After that, he starts following Frankenstein without taking any shortcuts, as he believes that the resistance fighters will find him first. Bruce comments that Frankenstein might be leading the race, but Joe has so many points that he will win even if he comes second. Meanwhile, resistance fighters plant a bomb and jump inside Jane's car to choke her. She eventually pushes the man out and follows the motorcycle, which results in her driving near a landmine. She stops, but notices multiple ruined cars and starts her car again, only to drive over a landmine which explodes and kills Jane. Elsewhere, Frankenstein asks Annie for a drink and sneaks a capsule into it before telling her to drink up the rest. On the other hand, Fury finds Frankenstein's location and tells Payne that he is going to kidnap him, but she insists on joining him and they both head to the location. Annie passes out and Frankenstein spots a plane, which uses a loudspeaker to ask Frankenstein to stop, but he pays no heed to them. Fury calls out to Annie, but when she doesn't respond, he tells Payne that Annie is dead and starts bombing the car. Joe feels relieved upon seeing this as he believes that he has won the race, but Frankenstein manages to dodge a series of bombs. Frankenstein drives to narrow pathways, so Fury orders a car to follow him, but the car flips and explodes. Fury drops more bombs, and a shrapnel pierces Frankenstein's arm, but Frankenstein drives further into the mountains, causing Fury's plane to crash. Bruce reports it as Frankenstein fighting the French Air Force and defeating them, claiming that this will get him the most points ever in the history of the game. Annie regains consciousness, and Frankenstein reveals that he gave her a sleeping pill. He tells her that he destroyed the plane and apologizes, as he knew they were Annie's people, but she also feels bad because he was hurt. She tells him that all the plans of resistance are over and steers off to drive them off a cliff. However, Frankenstein manages to stop the car and urges her to help him. He takes off his glove to reveal that when he wins the race and shakes hands with Mr. President, he will detonate a grenade that has been implanted in his prosthetic right hand. Annie doesn't wish for Frankenstein to die, but he claims that it is all he has ever worked towards. They continue the race and eventually catch up to Joe, who releases grease on the road, but Frankenstein eventually manages to race parallel to them. Annie takes off Frankenstein's prosthetic hand and throws it at Joe's car, killing him. Frankenstein wins the race, and Mr. President states that all racers other than indestructible Frankenstein have been killed by the French. Annie, disguised as Frankenstein, reaches up to shake hands with the president while holding a knife, but Payne shoots her, thinking she is Frankenstein. Payne is arrested on the spot, and the president unveils Frankenstein's mask to find out that it is Annie who swapped clothes with him. Frankenstein rams Mr. President's stage with his car, finally killing him. Frankenstein stands victorious as the crowd chants his name, and Annie joins him. Later, Frankenstein becomes the new president, marries Annie, and appoints Payne the Minister of Domestic Security, so she can rebuild the state and dissolve the dictatorship by restoring elections. Frankenstein abolishes the race, but Bruce opposes it, saying that even Frankenstein's popularity depended on violence and that the public needs such performances. Frankenstein gets inside the car, but Bruce blocks him, saying that he cannot take away their American freedom. So Frankenstein hits Bruce with his car and drives off with Annie. Death Race 2050 begins when the chairman of the United Corporations of America claims that America has given the world its biggest sport ever, and the host introduces the first participant, a female cultist, Tammy the Terrorist, who has participated 3 times in the death race. The reporter Grace asks Tammy if she is a radical fundamentalist, but Tammy claims that she is spreading love across the world, and to prove it, she has hidden a surprise in the audience. The people start looking for it, and a man finds a bag which explodes, killing 17 people, and the host wonders whether pre-race deaths will count toward the score. A pop-up explains that the winner is determined by both race time and fatalities, awarding 10 points for an adult, 20 points for anyone younger, and 50 points for a senior citizen. The host goes on to explain that despite free sterilization clinics, America is suffering from overpopulation. So the government uses Death Race as both entertainment and population control. Suddenly, they are joined by a newcomer to the race named Minerva, who is a hip-hop star and introduces herself with a new rap song. On the other hand, a young man watches the race with a new technology called the proxy, which puts the home viewer into the passenger seat of the racer. A genetically engineered ex-athlete named Jed Perfectus joins the race. But before he can give his interview, the past 4 years winner, Frankenstein enters the building, making people cheer for him. The doctor comments that Frankenstein has more machinery in his body than most cars, and Jed protests, saying that an ultimate driver would have never gotten into such fatal crashes, but no one listens to him. The host reveals a surprise, as a new participant is a self-driving car called Abe, designed to understand the rules of the game perfectly. Grace asks Abe for his predictions, but he only states that machines will soon enslave humans. Back in the building, Frankenstein meets Annie, his proxy, as she will be using her visor and microphone to give home viewers the experience of being in Frankenstein's car. He claims that he doesn't care for money, fans, or her broadcast, but she angrily tells him that she worked hard to get this opportunity, so he should at least show some courtesy, but he ignores her. Finally, the race begins, and Abe blocks Tammy perfectly with its AI technology, which makes her angry. Meanwhile, Frankenstein and Jed move neck to neck, forcing Frankenstein to take the underpass while Jed takes the correct pathway and moves onto the flyover. Annie asks Frankenstein to go back, but he refuses and breaks through the wall, jumping back to the main road right in front of Jed. As they both move on a bridge, Jed threatens to push Frankenstein's car into the sea, so Annie asks Frankenstein to let Jed pass, but Frankenstein speeds up, causing Jed to hit his car into the wall of the bridge. Jed uses his strength to push his car back to the road, but the Americans are still not impressed with him. Once they lose Jed, Frankenstein takes off his mask, claiming that it is itchy, but the chairman becomes angry, saying that it will remove the mysterious element that makes people adore Frankenstein. Elsewhere, Tammy runs over a citizen, cutting him in half, and the host announces that Tammy's pre-race kills have been approved, putting her in the leading position. All drivers have split into their preferred routes to reach today's checkpoint. A group of resistance fighters watches the race, and their leader, named Hamilton, explains that they've watched enough, and their time to fight back has arrived. One of them protests, saying that they should use education as their tool and do a peaceful protest to show they are different, but she explains that the only way to abolish the death race is to kill all racers. On the other hand, Minerva plays her new song on a deck, causing all her fans to step out, so she can attack them and gain scores, but Tammy arrives and kills them before Minerva.
Those were my fans!
Meanwhile, Annie tries to interview Frankenstein for the viewers, but he pushes her head to the side of the car and ignores her. She then tries to smell him to transmit his smell, so he allows her 3 questions. She asks him if he thinks Jed can beat him, and if he considers himself a role model, but Frankenstein denies both. He urges her to ask better questions, but she reveals that she has covered all major American stories for the past 5 years, and only became a proxy because the corporations want positive news while the world is suffering from a famine. He asks her what her stance is on death race, but she avoids the question by revealing that there is a scoring opportunity nearby. Elsewhere, Abe finds a pedestrian and rushes to attack them, but it turns out to be a trap by resistance fighters, who force the proxy to get out of the car and address the people of America through her, claiming they will overthrow the government. The officials quickly put on an ad break while Abe attacks them, killing the resistance fighters before killing his own navigator.
You've got mail. 10 points. Bye-bye. Kill. 10 points. 10 points.
Abe suddenly has an existential crisis and abandons the race to discover its purpose in life. Annie comments that Frankenstein is the chairman's favorite, saying that maybe they race in golf carts, but Frankenstein claims that the chairman won't like that because of his wig. The chairman reviews this clip and thinks that Frankenstein has gotten too bold, so he must be stopped.
It's an ordinary guy.
Looks like we got a real tough guy.
Am I not tough? Am I not a guy?
Of course you are, baby. But you need clean kills if you want to beat Frankenstein.
Jed makes 2 kills while Minerva enters the Appalachian desert when she gets surrounded by resistance fighters. Her proxy pushes a few motorcycles away, killing them, while Minerva blasts her rap song. Frankenstein reaches the checkpoint first, and Jed comes in second place, quickly shooting an arrow at the guy, welcoming racers to score some more points. However, due to a high kill count, Tammy takes first place on the overall leaderboard, while Minerva comes last, blaming the white woman for stealing her kills and threatening to attack her. At the rest stop, the press surrounds Frankenstein, so Annie tells them to give him a rest, but Jed joins them, claiming that he will destroy Frankenstein on day 2. Meanwhile, the chairman holds a meeting with the few wealthiest people and reveals that the current unemployment rate is 99.9%, so he plans on launching a program for Jed where 10,000 people will be paid to participate in their certain death. He explains that Frankenstein has lost his charm and that they must eliminate him on the second day of the race. On the other hand, Hamilton contacts Annie, ordering her to eliminate Frankenstein to abolish the race. She tries to talk to Frankenstein, but he asks her not to annoy him, as he has to study the roadmap and fix his robotic arm. He claims that he has dedicated his life to the race, but gets angry when Annie calls him the chairman's pet. and he reveals that racing is the only way he can show his resistance by having a job. He tells Annie that he has no interest in what she is trying to do. The next morning, Annie promises to help him win, but Frankenstein warns her, telling her that today the pedestrians will be shooting back at them. The host announces that the drivers will pass through the heartland of the country, known for its gun-wielding citizens. The second day of the race begins with Jed killing a fan of his, and then attaching an arrow with the rope to Frankenstein's car, slowing him down. The people start shooting at them, and a man gets cut by the rope, but Annie manages to unhook the car.
How about it, folks? I say those points get split right down the middle.
In Meatpakistan, Tammy's church waits for her, and when she arrives, they lie down in a line to increase her points. But Minerva arrives and steals all the kills.
My fans, your followers, be...
Meanwhile, Frankenstein notices that the nitro is off and tells Annie to take the wheel, but warns her not to turn. However, a kitten comes onto the road, and Annie is worried, but Frankenstein takes control of the wheel and turns it before they can hit the cat. She asks him about his morning routine and turns on the visor, and he explains that he has a cat and a dog, which makes her laugh. She gets a message from a fan telling them to take a shortcut, so Frankenstein follows her directions. On the other hand, Minerva gets attacked by Tammy's cult members who have attached dynamites to themselves, and they manage to pull her proxy out, but he is killed by a bomber.
I don't want to die sober.
Elsewhere, Frankenstein gets stuck in a cornfield, and Annie takes off her VR before wandering off suddenly. Resistance fighters attack Frankenstein, and the host thinks of cutting the feed, but the chairman believes this will be a good opportunity to have Frankenstein killed, and orders it to be showcased everywhere. However, Frankenstein throws a spear and kills one man before fighting with the rest, eventually killing them all, which makes the chairman furious.
This is bullshit!
Frankenstein drives to the other side of the field where he finds Annie and tells her that he isn't stupid, but she puts a gun to his head. She apologizes, saying that she has to follow the orders, but Frankenstein swiftly takes the gun from her and forces her to watch as he runs over another rebel. They arrive at the second checkpoint, and in their room, Annie admits to being a rebel. She urges him to join their cause, saying that millions of people live miserable lives, so it is his responsibility to guide the people who follow him. However, Frankenstein claims that he is a racer and not a politician, as all he wanted was to have a genuine co-pilot and win the race. She tells him how selfish he is, and is about to beat him with a golf stick, but then backs out and just breaks a lamp before leaving. Annie heads down to a bar where she finds Minerva, who comments that Death Race is evil, but it doesn't make the participants evil, as they are only trying to survive in a harsh environment. Minerva reveals to Annie that she is an educated intellectual, as her father was the chairman of the history department at Stanford, and that she plays a stereotypical hip-hop character in order to have a job. On the other hand, Jed starts going crazy, as he imagines himself being insufficient as a real man and rushes to murder Frankenstein, thinking it will prove his masculinity. The two get into a fight, and Frankenstein smashes Jed a few times before Jed manages to land a punch. Eventually, Jed brings out an arrow gun, which he uses to trap Frankenstein against the wall. Just as he is about to kill Frankenstein, Annie arrives and hits his head with a golf stick, knocking him unconscious. Later, she tries to recruit Frankenstein to the resistance, but he claims that people have stopped working and fighting for their rights, so it's just better to wipe out humanity. On the other hand, Hamilton arrives in the chairman's room, revealing that she has been working for him. The next morning, the host announces that all drivers must remain on the approved routes for their safety, or the government will not be responsible for providing any protection. The race begins, and Jed again murders a facilitator to score some points. Frankenstein's arm starts malfunctioning because of his fight with Jed, so Annie helps him shift gears while he explains that they cannot beat Jed in points because there are no pedestrians. However, they come across a group of fans ready to sacrifice themselves, but Frankenstein considers it immoral and drives past them. Tammy and Minerva compete, and Minerva mourns the loss of her proxy, so she turns around to hit Tammy's car. Just as the cars are about to collide, Tammy's proxy turns her car to the side. Tammy attaches dynamite to his body and throws him out of the car in Minerva's pathway, but Minerva turns her car, which leads her to accidentally drive off the cliff. Minerva's car explodes while she is brutally injured, so Tammy comes down and laughs while Minerva dies. However, a returning Abe rams Tammy against the wall and self-destructs, destroying them both. On the other side, Hamilton orders her people to kill Annie as well, as she has failed her mission. The chairman has handed a secret pathway to Jed while resistance fighters surround Frankenstein, and the chairman cuts their cameras, telling Frankenstein to make his final moments memorable for the followers. They start launching cannons, but Frankenstein drives in such a way that he avoids all bombs. Annie manages to throw off a few motorcyclists, killing them, while Frankenstein eventually drives through a narrow door in which Hamilton's truck gets stuck and explodes, killing them all. Jed is only a few miles from the finish line and starts celebrating, but Annie pushes Frankenstein to continue, and he appears, resulting in the two moving head-to-head. Jed tells his proxy to take the wheel and jumps into Frankenstein's car to choke him. but Frankenstein pushes him back. Jed loses control of his car and he crashes into the virtual reality control booth, killing both the host and Grace.
Isn't he headed straight for the studio?
I am perfectus! I am perfection!
Before finishing the race, Frankenstein confirms with Annie if she is ready for a revolution, and when she says yes, Frankenstein broadcasts a message to his fans suggesting that the chairman himself is worth 1,000 points. Frankenstein runs over the chairman, making the entire population feel liberated and powerful. So Frankenstein urges the people to abandon their virtual reality lives and begin their own death race, as the nation descends into widespread violence, killing their family and friends for the sake of power. Frankenstein and Annie observe from afar, saying that they will help rebuild and repopulate the country once the chaos subsides.
Well, somebody needs to repopulate.
That's all 6 Death Race movies recapped into one banger of a video. I'd greatly appreciate some love, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.